Welcome back, everybody. We're just roaring along today. Really exciting, fun sessions, and loving all the participation that you all are putting into this in the chat with your thoughtful comments and questions. Please continue that. And in fact, I'm going to drop something right in the chat right now. Let's see here. We should all say hello to one another and introduce ourselves. Here's my LinkedIn. Hopefully I can connect with a lot of you as I have been throughout the show. And if you have questions for the panel today, please put them into the Q&A area, which is just to the left of the chat. It'll be easier for our speaker and panelists to see them there. This next panel is on exciting developments in Asia, and it's a great representative group, and I think they're going to try to kind of cover particular territories rather than just looking at Asia as a big conglomerate. So that'll be an interesting approach. And without further ado, let me introduce our panel. Ben Fetter, President of International Partnerships, North America, Tencent Games. Welcome, Ben.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yep. And JJ, CEO of Pearl Abyss America. JJ, welcome. JJ, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, Akshana. I was having a little trouble just to unmute and start my video. Hi, everybody.
Great to have you here. Yep. And Simon Sim, President of Netmarble US. Simon, welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you. Yep.
Good to see you again.
And we have Max DeWitt, Global Head of Content Development, Unity Technologies. Welcome, Max.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for staying up late or waking up early for us. I know it's like 3 in the morning where you are, so appreciate it.
No worries. I'm excited for this.
And our moderator, none other than Mike Vorhaus. Mike from the Hollywood Hills. Welcome back.
Hi, everybody. Great to see you, old friends, new friends. I think the conference has been amazing. 17th LA Games Conference. Great talk by Chris DeWolf yesterday. Simon, you'll be glad to know. And I'm really looking forward to this session. Unfortunately, when I go to a lot of panels and conferences and I ask the question about how much time people have spent in Asia, and I've often been known to ask the question specifically about China, I am very, very disappointed, whether it's a large banker gathering in New York City or it's a large gaming gathering in San Francisco. And we put this panel together from the point of view that certainly LA Games Conference and myself believe that no matter how much we talk about how important Asia is to gaming, we still never spend the time on it. Most of us haven't spent good time over there. We haven't gotten to know the companies. We just haven't put the time and effort into Asia that I believe it should have, because of, quite frankly, it's invented most of modern gaming for us today. So I'm very excited about this panel. It's a first-class group. I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves and just mention a little bit what territories you feel that you're most expert in. And we're going to be looking at trends and regulations and successes and platforms, but we're going to be looking at them by different countries. And I think we'll have a lot of good back and forth. We're just going to start up in my left-hand corner with Max. Max, just introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you're doing in the territories. I know you've worked in quite a few Asian territories.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, so hi, everybody. My name is Maxime DeWitt. I'm the Global Head of Content for the Unity Distribution Portal at Unity Technologies. Personally, I'm from the Netherlands, but I've spent the last 11 years in Asia, of which 7 years in China. And prior to joining Unity, I was working for a subsidiary of Sega as a game publisher in Southeast Asia. So the markets I definitely like to contribute on are China and the Southeast Asia markets.
Excellent, thank you. Hi, JJ, how are you today?
I'm good.
Thanks for being with us. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm JJ, and yeah, nice to meet you all. It's a great pleasure to be here in this panel with you guys all. And I'm from Prolobis, the developers of Black Desert MMORPG franchise, and I'm leading the Prolobis US team here in California. I was actually born and raised in South Korea, and I had worked in Korea for 6 years before I came to the States in 2008. So since then, I've been working in the States for the last 13 years. So I actually would say the territory I have most experience with work-wise is actually the US by now, but I've been traveling back and forth a lot between the US and Asia, working on the global publishing, international deals, partnerships, and M&As, etc., throughout most of my career. So I think I can safely say that I'm still pretty familiar with the Korean video games market.
Excellent. Outstanding. Ben Federer, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Mike.
Tell us a little bit about your most interesting background. And I know you've spent a lot of time throughout Asia, not just working, but living.
Yeah, well, I know what you're referring to. I used to be the CEO of Take-Two Interactive, and then before I joined Tencent, I took a little sabbatical and lived in Indonesia, in Bali, for the better part of a year. I think that's what Mike is referring to. I joined Tencent about 4 or 5 years ago and been very active as a bridge between the US and China, and trying to really help build Tencent's business in the United States, as well as expand its current business in the United States. And it's been an incredible ride. And Tencent's just, it's an incredible company, and obviously I think almost by any metrics, the largest video game company in the world. And it's an exciting platform to be a part of.
Great. Well, it's a company that we all, I think, look up to. I think Netmarble has also had some pretty spectacular success and deep involvement out here in the West. Simon, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what territories you most want to talk about.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm Simon Sin. Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm president of Netmarble US. As Mike mentioned, that Netmarble, our headquarters is worldwide number 6 mobile game publisher and developers now. So my major role in US is to understand Eastern versus Western gamers difference and market difference, and then bring in our Eastern games to Western market. That is a part of my major role. To do that, me and my team deep dive about what is the difference between Eastern and Western, what kind of game mechanics is working with a different region, or common things even in different region. That is an important topic I can talk today. And also the other topic is Netmarble, we are work with many big IP holders and include our own IPs. We have many successful titles, include not only just from Eastern and also but also from Western market, and many IPs we are working on to get such as Lineage to Revolution, which is a very famous MMORPG in Asia, and the 7 Legends Grand Cross Netflix animation show, and then Marvel Feature Fight, which is Marvel IP, which is globally popular. So how IPs can help about your expansion to the different market. That part I also can explain more to the audience. And lastly, since Netmarble, we are very deep dive about localization and culturalization across Eastern to Western. So those aspects, since we have some several overseas branches, I work with them together. So those parts I can give more idea with the audience today.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's just jump into the big picture. Let's talk about each of you 1 or 2 key trends in 1 or 2 key markets you're most comfortable with. Future of gaming, next few years, key trends. I recognize that we'll talk a lot about mobile today, but to the extent you see a key trend outside of mobile, please call that out. JJ, why don't we start with you, and you can hit on Korea and make any comparisons perhaps you'd like to the US.
Yeah, so if I were to pick a couple of things as a market trend or just general market characteristics for Korea, so this, as you guys know, actually, Korea is one of the biggest video games market in the world. For the past several years, it's been ranked at 4th, I believe, in terms of the revenue size, only after China, the US, and Japan. So it's bigger than any other European countries, but also the majority of the revenue actually comes from either mobile or PC platforms. So there actually you can see how big its mobile and PC games markets are. And actually the console game is still small, under, I guess, 5% of the entire market size, but it's growing fast. That's also something actually I like to point out. I think just not like, what we see in the Western markets. Actually, interest in a console market has been growing very fast in the recent years, entire Asia, I believe, and also in Korea. So I see a huge room for growth for console games in Korea. And I'd also say most of the Korean game players are competitive gamers and they enjoy the competitions, even in casual games. And that's probably why the esports started early in Korea. And yeah, there are actually a lot more to talk about Korean market, but these are the first things for the market trend. It's just an intro. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Max, would you like to hit on a couple of key trends, perhaps particularly from the Vietnam and Thailand points of view?
Oh, I was thinking more of China, honestly.
Please start with the most important country in gaming in the world. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think, and this is not necessarily a new trend, right? But this is a continued trend, and we're just going to continue seeing that. I think two things are very important. One, the continued push of Chinese game developers and publishers bring content to the rest of the world, and no longer just looking at their own markets. And I'm sure Ben has a thing or two to say about that one as well. And also something that, and I think that's something that is pretty relevant over the last half a year, where China was never really seen as a AAA producer, right? And I think that is definitely going to change over the next couple of years. We saw the launch of Genshin Impact, for example, that took the world by storm. Recently we had the announcement of Black Myth Wukong, right, which kind of shook up the world as well. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if we were to see more AAA announcements of that kind of stature coming from China.
I'd love for you to make a few comments about Southeast Asia, but just sticking with China for just a minute. What kind of trends are you seeing in terms of genre? And then why don't you also comment on the platform relative penetrations and usage? Talking about China. You see the...
Yeah, so for China, I think the largest genre is still MMORPGs, though it's kind of on the decline, not significantly, but it's not growing for sure. One thing is, like, I think the city builder type games have taken are really prevalent right now and are upcoming, and not just for the Chinese market itself, but also on the export side, right? Like just one that comes to mind is, for example, Warpath from Lilith Game, that is a global title that was launched. And yeah, I think, of course, Battle Royale takes Battle Royale does fairly well in China as well, and the multiplayer Battle Arena games. And again, lastly, idle RPG also remains fairly large in China as well, and I think especially due to the success of AFK Arena.
Great. Thank you.
Maybe Ben wants to jump in on that one as well.
Just what I was going to say.
I sort of agree with everything you said, Max. The only other genre that I'd add is kind of an interesting one called ACG, which is kind of animation and it's cartoons, whatever, it's manga kind of thing. But it's kind of it's more of a more female-oriented genre, and many of these games have a core game loop that's around collecting and leveling up characters. There's lots of intermixing of RPG and other types of genres like collectibles and ACG themes. A lot of them have heavy gotcha mechanisms driving monetization. Genshin Impact's a great example of that. And so, those are some of the genres that I think are really up and coming in China. I'd absolutely agree with Max that the quality of games coming out of China is improving. every day, every year. I mean, it just gets, I think you'll see a lot more AAA type of quality coming out of China. I would say that in terms of general trends, one of the things that's become interesting, I know China's been a huge market, but we think it's kind of, I've seen data that sort of says China gaming revenue is about the same or larger than the US at this point, and Asian gaming generally is about 50% of the world. So it's kind of, it's a big market. So you opened up with sort of saying a lot of executives you speak to haven't spent enough time in Asia. And I absolutely agree with you. If you think half the market is in Asia, you're not spending time there, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
And then I think, you mentioned Southeast Asia and India. These are lots of people getting their first smartphones and playing games in Southeast Asia. Mobile is going to be huge in those markets. Our ARPUs are lagging, but they'll catch up eventually. But there's, regardless, the users, the engagements, Southeast Asia, I mean, these are huge markets that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Can we take one more minute on India? And then, of course, we're going to come to Simon for the original question. You brought it up, so I just wanted to probe a little bit more. I'm not an expert at all, but I guess the smartphone, I guess the advanced text messaging phone is still pretty dominant there, and the smartphone's kind of starting or emerging. And tell us what's relevant about India in addition to a billion plus people.
You have an India expert, or you want me to just jump in as the China expert?
No, I want you to jump in. I just didn't want to leave you hanging.
I think India is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of tragedy going on in India at the moment. I don't want to, talk about the market without talking about kind of all the challenges they're facing at the moment, and kind of our thoughts go to the people in India. I will say that India is complicated. I think India's rising middle class is probably exaggerated in terms of spending power, in terms of how big it actually is for, the number of people they have. I think it's still kind of a rising middle class. Nonetheless, we're seeing incredible engagement and interest from things like PUBG or whatever. I think the mobile game market in India, eventually the monetization will catch up to the engagement and the usage. And I think it's first and foremost driven by smartphones and people getting their first smartphones. And these are, as you know, these are powerful computing devices and powerful gaming devices.
Great. Simon, we'd like to hear from you about key trends and in countries where you feel there's some particular trends you've been noting.
Oh, sure. So since our company is based in South Korea and we are more focused on mobile games, I want to talk South Korea mobile game market first. As we know, the South Korea is the world's fourth largest mobile gaming market. It's almost last year is almost 8.5 billion US dollar market. It's very big market. But it's very, very challenging. And South Korea mobile gaming is mostly like MMO, mobile MMORPG driven market based on PC MMORPG IPs or newly coming MMORPGs. Because what we observed in South Korea is representing in the future of other countries. Because at the beginning of South Korea mobile market was quite casual games or dominated. But South Korea gamers are quite speedily consuming content, and they are well accepted about new game genre and then new fun. So the acceptance level is quite fastly grow, and their playing environment as a smartphone device spec and also air signal environment is quite great, and also their Wi-Fi is super popular in South Korea. So according together, along with those environment, the more high fidelity, as Max mentioned, that the AAA games can possibly running across all the devices most of the people has, and then because of their content consumption and deep games is getting popular in South Korea. So as a Western game companies, go to South Korea, you might need to consider those users' acceptance level and play time, content consumption, and expectation level of fidelity. That is South Korea's mobile gaming situation. And I also see some cross-platform play is getting popular even in South Korea. PC, console, mobile. Still, console is relatively small than PC and mobile. Mobile is dominating South Korea. But the trend-wise, cross-platform play is getting one of the trend. That's what I can see. And since Netmarble has Taiwan and Thailand branches, so Taiwan also one of the big market we are looking for in Southeast Asia. So there are worldwide the number of 15 revenue market, but the Taiwan market is also what we observed. The Taiwan mobile gaming market is a mostly MMORPG driven market from China or from Korea. So the behavior is quite similar, like what we observed from Korea. So the gamers quite speedily consuming the deep content, and their environmental device spec is quite high, and they are willing to play more, and they are looking for keep looking for high fidelity games. So and also different thing is that China also quite sports driven country. So the Taiwan also quite sports driven country. So some sports game is popular. That what we can see in this mobile gaming market. And Thailand is interesting. They have more than 70 million population, but among those population, 41% is gamer. So quite huge gamers over there. So as a Western game perspective, if you need bring enough users from South Asia, Taiwan, Thailand, those market will be a considerable market. They also quite fastly consume content. But a little different with Taiwan. Thailand is different genres popular, like Battle Royale, MOBA, sports, definitely RPG or casual. They are very diverse genres popular at the moment. The overall trend-wise, when we observe the mobile gaming in South Asia, yes, MMORPG or high-fidelity games drive majority of revenue, but at the same time, some RPG feature-involved casual game is become popular and already popular in there. I can see those trends from Western market even these days. Many casual games bringing RPG mechanic to the casual game mechanic mixed together, and then showing more highly engaged users, right? So that trend was come from South Asia. Now it's come from, I can see even in Western market.
Well, what an extraordinary analysis across half of Asia. Any comments, Simon, also on Thailand? Excuse me, on Vietnam? You said Thailand's 70 million, Vietnam's bigger?
No, the Thailand is 70 million, and then 41% is gamers. Is 19 as a gaming market, I think it's worldwide 19 biggest market, 19th.
And Matt, I know you've spent a lot of time in Vietnam working in gaming.
So Vietnam is a fairly complicated market, a bit similar to China, where you also actually need to have a government license to publish your game. So in order to successfully enter the Vietnamese market, whether it's for iOS or Android, you're going to either have to set up local operations there, which is a fairly large investment, or you're going to have to work with one of the local powerhouses like VNG to help publish your game there. One thing I think that's interesting to, if you look at the ANI intelligence data, right, is that right now the top 3 countries in Southeast Asia in terms of downloads, right, are the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam, which is logical because those are the countries with the largest population. Right now, out of the 6 major Southeast Asia countries, they're also the lowest in consumer spend. But if you're looking on a year-to-year basis, these are also the 3 fastest growing ones. And although Philippines is yet to be seen, but Indonesia and Vietnam also continue to see very good development in terms of economic growth, and consumer spend is not far behind, right? So myself personally, I'm fairly bullish about these 3 markets. But I think the most challenging market, even though it holds a lot of opportunity, is Vietnam, just because of the regulations.
Very interesting. Thank you for that analysis. Excellent. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a topic that always comes up in almost all markets, which is regulations and regulated or market-based government or market-based regulations and restrictions. What's kind of unique in these markets that you're closest to in terms of the regulatory environment and perhaps to some extent from the point of view of an American company wanting to be active in the markets you're expert in? What's important in the regulatory environment in the current environment? Well, I know we'll have a couple of you talking about the degree of regulation and the style of regulation in Korea, for instance. Simon, would you or JJ like to take that first? Tell us a little bit about what the gaming regulatory environment is like in Korea. Simon, looks like that's you.
I can talk a
Okay,
little bit,
great,
and then
JJ,
probably
thank you.
Simon
JJ.
also can add more points. So actually, speaking of regulations in Asia, there's a lot to talk about. I usually prefer not to going into too much details because it can be a long discussion. But generally, many Asian countries have more strict guidelines or government regulations. You just have to follow for their laws or policies. And just important thing is you just have to do a lot of researches before you enter those regions. And just speaking of Korea, I know actually there are a lot more discussions about China and Southeast Asia and some of Southeast Asian countries. But just speaking of Korea, for example, you have to build a system in your PC games or console games to make your games not accessible to kids at nighttime so they cannot play after certain hours. It's just one of the examples. It's a requirement for PC and console games. I don't think it's for mobile games. So things are a little complicated. Also, things are changing. That's another point here. So be aware that the information you just got 1 year ago or 2 years ago might not be actually valid anymore. So please keep up with the latest policy and government regulations when you enter any Asian market.
And give yourself the time to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also want to add one more thing. So since our company is covering mobile games, as you know, mobile game is a platform driven policies applied together. So I believe a platform company also quite rapidly apply to meet the regulation perspective. So since the mobile game publisher, we try to meet with the publisher, the platform companies regulation. By the way, what I want to give advice, not only just Asia, once we launch a game on global scale, each country has a different regulation. As JJ mentioned, that I want to recommend a deep dive for each country's regulation. Some specific country has a trick here. That at the same time, what we learned is not only just regulation. These days, users, some users preference mismatch, some boycott, those situations could be happening. So cultural issue also, I think cultural issue also very important along with the regulation, right? So I would recommend check more those cases, especially Western game studio go to the Eastern. There are many resistance or unfamiliar things happening. So those cultural parts also must check. That's what I want to recommend to the studios.
Excellent. Any other comments, Ben or Max, that you want to make on maybe differences in different markets in terms of regulation? I loved Simon's point about the regulators are not entirely governments.
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe I'll leave Ben to first comment on China. Just I wanted to add on Korea, just very quickly, especially on the mobile scene, right? Is because some people have heard that you might need a license, especially for mobile games in Korea, and it's purely for a specific set of themed games, right? Especially when it's a bit more mature in terms of gambling, heavy violence, maybe some sexual content is in there. Then you're going to need a GCRB license, right? And it's not for all genres. And I think, for example, and JJ and Simon, you also know, right, is that Playrix has been incredibly successful, and they have, as everybody knows, a much more casual genre of games, and they've been doing fantastic by themselves in Korea. And by the way, they've been doing fantastic in Southeast Asia as well. And yeah, and in the other, I think that these are the three markets, I think, from my perspective, that have regulations in terms of government is China, Korea, and then Vietnam. I think those are the main ones. But as they rightfully pointed out, right, even if there's no regulations, doesn't mean it's an easy market to enter. But that's a different topic we'll maybe get into later. But Ben, maybe you want to share more about China?
Look, I don't have much more to add. I think everybody said is correct. When you're going into these markets, in any market in Asia, some of them are regulated, and you need to be well versed in what those regulations are and how to comply with them. That's much better than not complying with them. And so just be smart about it, and if you need to, get a partner or get the right advice, and obviously comply with all the regulations. And it's something you just need to, in order to operate in Asia, and generally you need to have the proper licenses and paperwork done.
I mean, the nature of building a network of experts is the same in Asia as it is in the West, but it involves time. You have to spend time with people. We had some great questions coming in from the audience. Ben, I'd love to have you address this one, and anybody else. As Darren Phillips points out, in the US, there are two ways for players to access mobile games, generally speaking, Google and Apple stores. Talk to us more about the distribution, the stores that are available, the stores that need to be managed in some of the largest Asian countries. Ben, I'd like to better understand the multitude of stores that exist in China, if you can shed some light on that for the mobile world.
There are a lot of stores in China, a lot of, some of them, we operate, and some of them operated by the mobile carriers. And the economics splits are kind of complex with respect to, where you get your game from and who gets what share of the revenue. But it's, I think, probably more fragmented in China than it is, say, in the United States. I think we're talking about mobile. Maybe we're not talking about mobile, but that's kind of my view of it. As you know, we operate not a store, we operate a platform called WeChat, which is, next to Facebook, probably the largest social network in the world and highly used in China. And that's kind of often a great way for consumers to find out about new games and find out about, where to acquire, where to get their games, where to download games. And so, I'm not sure what the nature of the question is, where we're trying to get to, but it's a little, the stores in China, they certainly, where you can download games, is probably much more diverse than it is in the United States. And so you have so sometimes you may have a distribution challenge in making sure you have the right partners.
And advice on handling that complexity? Is it?
Well, look, first of all, Tencent's always a great company to partner with when you're trying to do business in China. And we obviously can help navigate all of that. And I do think in China still, it's important to have the right partner. It's very hard to go in and do it alone and navigate it yourself.
Other comments on stores and distribution outlets? I'm completely inadequate on any knowledge about how Steam exists, for instance, in Asia. I'm sure a number of people would be interested in that. Max, it looks like you're about to say something.
Yeah, well, I work for Unity's distribution portal, right? So it's I'll just say my two cents on Android.
Well, this is not a Google Meets platform, but
oh, sorry, my internet dropped for a second, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying, like on Android distribution, there's a trend of more Android stores coming up across the globe. A lot of these stores are global, and some of them have a much more local approach. And yeah, just for Android specifically, right? Also Korea, like there's two other stores, Samsung Galaxy Store and One Store, that have a very, very significant part of the Android market there, and they're competing heavily with Google Play. So if Korea is your thing, I would at least consider looking at One Store and Samsung Galaxy Store. And yeah, for China, like Ben said, find a local partner, because if you're going to do it by yourself, it's going to be a very significant investment to crack this market.
Any other countries where you feel a local partner is extremely important?
I would say Vietnam, as I mentioned. Japan, I think, is not necessarily about having a local partner. It's about having the right type of content. Of course, you still need the local approach and really understand the market. But even like as where other Southeast Asia countries or some markets, you can still be very successful with a Western game. And even I think your chances are larger in Korea or China. But if you're going to with Western content, going to Japan, you're gonna find it very difficult to get into the charts because it's a hyper local market and it's heavily dominated by the local players.
JJ or Simon, anything else you want to say about distribution or mobile or PC?
Yeah, so I want to shortly address in Asia, Southeast Asia, mostly the mobile gaming is not only just platform, also there are messenger connected games because of the visibility or user acquisition or social engaging perspective was quite popular. So still is a considerable option with the messenger platform together. But these days, the trend is half and half. Some games are launched along with the messenger platform together. Some games are directly launching. But it's a little different behavior than the Western games. Western game market, mobile gaming, you just directly launch in Apple and Google Play, right? But in Asia, you can consider the messenger platform. That's what I can address. And also, as I mentioned, that the partnership perspective, yes, local partnership as a Western game studios, some territory might be considerable option, even in mobile. In Asia, the gamers, the acceptance of game is a little different. I'm talking about mobile, different. Western gamers' preference is quite segmented, so performance marketing is much more a better way to appeal to those targeted audience. But Asia in general, users are very uniformed, so their lifestyle of their country is similar. What they like it is similar, so they are more uniformed users, gamers over there. So when you launch your game, if you are very strongly believe your game is quite appealing to those audience, then more a product marketing approach, like a big scale of a pre-registering campaign or launching marketing, like a TV commercial or influencers or media showcase, those are product marketing perspective rather than a performance marketing perspective, right? Those product marketing might be more appealing because content consumption is so fast, people are keep looking for new games and jumping in another games. So the steadily performance marketing might not good way to launch the game on your those territory. That's what I say. So as a partnership perspective, maybe you can consider those major country, Japan, Korea, even in Taiwan, those are big country. You can consider partners that will be very helpful, even not about the platform partner, but also the marketing partnership. You can consider that.
Great. I want to ask one more question, and then we'll take a couple of the audience questions that are popping up. Simon, I know you've talked a lot about the role of localization. I'd love to just get a little bit more granular with everybody about, are there some countries that demand more culturalization, kind of a higher degree of localization? Are there other countries that require very little? And maybe in that context, kind of what advice do you give a Western game company about being successful in the East? And what advice do you give a Western game company about being successful in the East and vice versa?
Yeah, so one of my role is understanding both market and how to appealing Asian games to the Western market. In that perspective, as you mentioned, the vice versa, I can give some idea from our experience. Since we are analyzing both different market from Eastern to Western. So I can give 4 aspects. Number 1, game mechanic perspective. Number 2, degree of culturalization perspective. Number 3, IP. Number 4, marketing perspective. So the first, game mechanics. As I mentioned that Korea and Taiwan and some of Southeast Asia has some similarity about game genre, right? So when you bringing your game, you are considering your game to the Eastern market, you need to understand which market, which audience are ready to accept your games. and vice versa, right? So each market has a different preference, different popular genre because of the network environment or device specs or users in previously popular games. It's because of users is learned from previous games, right? So that is a very important aspect that we learned. So every single time we bring Asia game to Western, our approach is same, watching the user trend, and then what kind of genre, what kind of mechanic will be appreciated, will be acceptable. Those are one of the important things I can address to you. So as I mentioned, the South Asia, in Korea and Taiwan, those markets is MMORPG driven market, but there are still some RPG mechanic with the other genre is getting popular. So if Western studio think about to launching your games to the Southeast Asia market or in general Asia market, please deep dive and check the market users acceptability level. And secondly, the degree of culturalization. I saw many Western companies when they launch in Asia, they just translated. They just using translation agency and they just translate. What we learned, if you just expand your country as a South Asia secondary, maybe you can do that. But if you are very serious about some territory, you want to achieve some remarkable result from that country, you might need to very seriously consider about culturalization. What we call culturalization is not only just a translation. Need to understand those IP, those users' cultural aspect or content consumption speed or difficulty acceptable level. And so we have two cases to dealing those matters. We bring Asia game to Western. So I think it will give some idea to the Western gamer to go to Asia, vice versa. So one case is we launched the 7 Deadly Sins Grand Cross. It's a 7 Deadly Sin is animation, Japanese animation IP. We observed the game was launched in Japan and Korea. We saw even US people download the game from other market and play them. So we can see there's a fandom is already here. In that cases, the culturalization degree might not need to be deep because the game core fan, the fan is already like the game. Only thing we do is a little tweak and translation, properly translate, and then avoid some inconvenience factors. That should be fine. Otherwise, there's another example from our game is Lineage 2 Revolution, which is mobile MMORPG. We launched that game in 2017. We believe Lineage 2 is a PC MMORPG, and there's even launched in the Western market. So we believe there's a fan over there. But MMORPG is not quite popular in Western market in mobile. So the content consumption difficulty level is quite different. So we tweaked a lot of those games, not only just translation, visual changing, content, difficult curve, and even business model. So it takes a long time and a lot of effort, but it worked. We achieved $1 billion US dollar revenue less than a year with this deep culturalization. So that being said, it depends on your games and then your game mechanic acceptability level. You need to think very deeply about the degree of culturalization. That's number 2 I want to address. And number 3, I think it's very important, IPs. So when you go to the Eastern market, as I mentioned, the Eastern market is very competitive market. They already have a dominated publishers or developers over there. So IP will be very helpful to appealing your game to the Eastern audience or vice versa. So as I mentioned, the 7 Deadly Sin is even not a global scale IP, but we believe there's a fandom even in US. And so we launched the game with the 7 Deadly Sins IP, and it quite successfully acceptable. And many fans from animation fans or in general, Japanese RPG fans are trying our game, and then we have a quite successful result. So, and also IP can help your game. If your game is unique enough, IP will help about your game to bring more users and engage them more. So I can give an example, our cases. We have a Marvel games, a Marvel Future Fight, but we bring Asian auto fighting mechanic to the Western market, which is very unfamiliar to the Western market, right? Then vice versa. If your game has a very unfamiliar mechanic to the Eastern gamers, but you believe they will appreciate it, then IP will help them. So we have the same example. We have a very, very compelling game with the three heroes fighting against a group of enemies. We believe this game will be very appreciated if Western gamers are trying our game, but how to make them try? So we put Marvel IP to the game mechanic and launch the game, which is Marvel Future Fight. And then until last year, it surpassed 120 million downloads globally. So that's an example of how IP can help you to bring your game to the different culture along with your game mechanic. And number 4 is marketing. As I mentioned there previously, marketing tactics should be different. You might need to consider different tactics of marketing. Asian market is more like a launching marketing, big scale of launching marketing, getting a lot of buzz at once might be helpful to drive a lot of organic gains. It's less relevant than performance marketing. Performance marketing is still valuable, but the product marketing is more important than the Asian market. That's what I can say.
Excellent, thank you. Ben, do you want to add a little bit of quick advice to the average Western company about how to try to succeed in some big markets in Asia and vice versa?
You know what I was thinking about localization, it's almost worth thinking about it in the inverse, which is, could you, think about how hard it is to develop a global game without localization. And it's almost, the Genshin Impact and, has been like huge success, but it's very rare and it costs a ton of money. It's like $100 million. Monkey King, kind of another example. But these games are, these global games are very, very difficult and also very new to emerge. So the only way to enter a market is through localization. I find that sort of localization is important in story-driven and RPG games specifically. I think what Simon says is absolutely right. I don't have anything more to add. I think it's, all those points are very, very well taken. And and the most important thing to recognize, that a global game is impossible, so it has to be localized. And the next level from there is like thinking that by just changing the language, you've localized it is a mistake. And you need to kind of really understand the markets in which you're participating. Otherwise you're basically just dumping your product and sort of see what happens. And nobody wants to see their IP being treated that way.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah,
can I add a few more points
JJ.
of a localization if time allows? Are you okay with the time?
Yes.
Yeah, this is just an interesting topic to me, and I, agree with all the, great points actually Simon brought up. But I actually like to speak from a little different perspective about localization. And when usually talk about localization, it's definitely text localization. People usually focus about product localization, but I always want to emphasize the importance of live service localization. I mean, if your product is localized, I think it's always good to provide the local language community management and customer services in a better way that fits that market. I think Asian players are usually very local and very active in their communities. It's always very important to track on the community trend and sentiment and understand better about what they want. So that's the importance of localization to me, not just product localization. And also when it comes to culturalization, actually, funnily, from my experience, I actually usually advise not to localize your product too much when you enter Asian markets, especially when the devs don't fully understand the cultural context, why they have to make certain changes, unless those culturalization requirements are actually really needed by the government regulations or laws, or it's really something taboo or prohibited culturally. I actually advise rather to stick with your originality, your content and little details you actually created to make the game fun and meaningful to your audience, because sometimes you actually end up losing big just to gain small, to just culturalize your game to another culture that you don't fully understand. So it's very, it's not an easy task. So as Simon said, there are a lot of components there. So I'd rather just advise to stick with your original content and just be confident about your content. So then what? So what should we do? Actually, there are the questions I hear from a lot of Western developers. And I think, solving a culturalization issue is not very easy, but there can be also alternative approach. I usually say give more power and freedom to the players in games so that they can actually create things in game that work better to their culture or even their individual style or preference. For example, creating a great character customization tool can actually work better than changing your character art to fit to another culture's beauty standard. This is an example. So give players an option to change their character's appearance to whatever they like. So, our game Black Desert also introduced a very sophisticated character customization tool, helping players create characters they want and to their culture beauty standard. And that definitely helped the game to be successful in both East and the West, I think. And also for costumes to just give them more options and let them choose. And similar idea is to also embrace diverse culture in your game. So for example, in our game, we also try to celebrate lots of international holidays from Halloween, St. Patrick's Day to the Chinese or Lunar New Year, whether people are really aware of those or not. So instead of just creating a local build that is just more customized to a certain country or culture, you can actually choose to make your game more global. And of course, it's not really an easy discussion, or there is no one single solution. You always need to do a lot of researches, and of course, you'd better represent those local culture or holidays in a very proper manner. But I think it's worthwhile. So yeah, culturalization is very tricky, but it can be solved in more creative ways these days.
Lots of wisdom on this panel. Thank you so much. Max, we're going to give you the last word. You can speak to anything you'd like, including East and West advice.
Yeah, I think on localization, they've shared so much great content already. So I think, a lot of panelists, and also if I look at the Q&A feed, is that where do I start, right? Like if I'm a Western publisher, I've never entered the Asian markets, like where do I start? And very frankly, it starts by just adding people on LinkedIn. And yes, LinkedIn is also available in China. There's people in China, there's people everywhere around Asia that are on LinkedIn. Ask industry friends that maybe have been to Asian conferences, might know a people or two. Invite people for a digital cup of coffee, right? There's no physical conferences that on the horizon, so just send out some LinkedIn invitations, ask some favors, get some introductions. Ask people like, hey, would you mind getting a cup of coffee and talking for 30 minutes and I have some questions. Start with that, right? Because a panel like this, you're just gonna get the very basics and at the end of it, you're gonna be confused. Start with that. And I can tell you, I've been here for over a decade. There's so many people happy to welcome Western companies come here, and there's a lot of potential partners, which we've mentioned are important to forge as well, local partnerships. But yeah, that's where I would just start. And from there, depending on what people tell you, right, take it from there, and from there out, start thinking as to what you might want to do in Asia and how you want to address it.
Thank you so much. I know we ran over a little bit. I want to thank everybody for their wisdom today.